The United States Marine Corps.
And what was the highest rank?
Corporal.
And what general locations did you serve in?
The what?
What general locations did you serve in?
No, I never left the United States.
Okay.
I was never in harm's way.
Okay. Now, were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, I volunteered for the draft. In those days, you couldn't enlist if you were 18 or over. You had to be drafted. And by the time I made up my mind to join the Marines, I had to volunteer for the draft. And then I got very much surprised once I did that. It wasn't automatic that I could become a Marine. There was like 200 or 300 people being interviewed for being drafted, and of that amount of people, they selected 35 to be naval draftees, and of the 35, they said 10% for Marine Corps, which left them with only 4. And how I ever became a Marine, I'll never know, because there was 50 other guys that wanted to be a Marine also that same day. And I don't know how to go beyond that. What was the question, maybe?
It was just, were you drafted or did you enlist?
Yeah. So, okay, it was a combination of both.
Mm-hmm. And where were you living at the time?
In New Britain.
And do you recall the date that you joined?
No, but I believe it was sometime in August, but I'm not certain.
Of what year?
43.
Okay. Why did you...
August of 43? I think it was August. July. August, yeah, okay, August of 43.
So you weren't exactly enlisted, or drafted. So what made you decide to join the military?
We were all in high school when Pearl Harbor was bombed, and I was in the first graduating class after war was declared in 1942. The war was declared in 41, at that time by Roosevelt, and I don't know. You better let me know what I'm answering to. I get a little absence of memory.
Why did you enlist?
Oh, I enlisted because I wanted to become a Marine gunner. I wanted to fire machine guns from aircraft. And then when I went to tell them that, they said, listen, we'll tell you what you're going to do. So I succumbed to that, but they put me, because I was interested in aviation, they put me in aviation and sent me to radio school in Jacksonville, Florida, which was a naval air base, or naval base, Jacksonville Naval Air Base, for radio, radar, and whatever. That's where I got all of that information, and did that with some reluctance, but as time went by, I had an appreciation for what I was doing, and I loved what I was doing. I became very proficient at it, taking Morse code and doing all those things that are required. And so I went from there. Well, I don't know how to explain it. I got a letter here that explains, not a letter, but I did a thing on my history of where I was and what I did. Because
we can get to that.
Okay.
Now, you got into the Marines just by chance, but why did you pick the branch originally that you picked when you went?
Because I wanted to be a Marine.
Okay.
That was more than anything else. I really was. I broke my mother's heart. She didn't want me to do that, but I did anyway.
Now, you already covered it a little bit, but what were your first days in the service like right after enlisting?
The first days of boot camp in the Marine Corps?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, well, I'll tell you, it was an experience because you never expected to go through what we went through on the first day. The first day, they set you down in front of a mirror and took off all your hair. So when you looked in the mirror, you didn't know it was you. And then that first day, they put us in the uniforms. And to answer your question, what they did in the beginning was give us a lot of a close order drill, and they told us when we had to go to bed, when we had to get up. We got up reveille at 6 o'clock in the morning, and we went to bed in the evening. I don't remember what specific time it was, but once we were in bed, we couldn't talk. We couldn't see anything. The next morning, for the very first night, after the very first night, the drill instructor, the drill sergeant in charge, came into the room, blew a whistle, and woke everybody up and said, "Okay, shave and shower for 5 minutes." And so that's what we had. That was exactly the way it was put. And I was kind of taken aback with that. And I've been comfortable saying it ever since, but that was what we did. And training in the Marine Corps had to be different than anywhere else. It was a tremendous discipline, and I didn't mind, because that's what I wanted. I wanted the Marine Corps, and they could do anything they wanted to me, and I wouldn't mind, and I didn't. But in boot camp, they took us eventually to a rifle range, taught us how to fire rifles. They taught us how to put a bayonet on our rifle. "Kill or be killed" was the slogan, stuff like that. You got to remember, World War II was quite intense at that time, and the Japanese were not our friends as they are today. They were a deadly enemy, and that takes me back to what I did when I got through with all of the educational programs with radio and radar. They assigned me to the 9th Marine Air Wing. I think it was the 9th Marine Air Wing, and after a while, I was called upon to join a platoon of Marines, and we were sent out on a secret mission off the southern coast of South Carolina or Georgia. And it was on a special island. It was a beautiful island, but it was a barren island at this point. And that island had been a cotton plantation before the Civil War, and so there was only 3 black families still living on that island, and us, and it was a snake-infested island, and I can't stand snakes, but I was what I was, and we were on this mission, and we had this group of men. We made a 500-foot in diameter target for a range, and then we had to, I was a radio man, so we had to have a tower. So we found something close by, the largest tree we could find. We stripped the tree and then made a platform on the tree for my radio observations of what was going on. In addition to that, we had built a bunker for detecting hits. And what these hits were, this whole secret mission was all about rockets. And never ever was there a rocket fired from an airplane before. So we trained the first rocket squadrons to go overseas firing rockets. One of the main reasons on that is that the Japanese were embedded in some of the islands in caves. They lived in caves there. They never came out of there. That was their domicile. And every time Marine Corps had the privilege of heading towards Japan, island by island, and they had to take each island, and it was disastrous trying to get on an island with somebody shooting down at you're coming in there. And so we sent the first air squadron to, we were told that the first air squadron went to Iwo Jima and fired into the caves of Iwo Jima, and that it reduced the slaughter. On Iwo Jima, there was 100 men from New Britain alone killed there. Just 100, from Connecticut, rather. From Connecticut. There were thousands killed on Iwo Jima. So it was very difficult. Anyway, that was our mission. And we not only trained fighter planes with the Marine Corps, F-6Fs and F-4Us, I think, and then we sent them over, and we also trained Navy pilots I forget the names of the ships. SB-2C Helldiver, I think, was one of them. And so not only did we train Marines, but we trained the Navy also for firing rockets. And that was the thing for them, to get these rockets onto ships as soon as possible, and they went on aircraft carriers, get them close to these islands so they can take off and fire into those tunnels and into the domiciles of the Japanese. And it was terrible, terrible, but that's what we did. So my whole time, now I could say that in a matter of a few minutes, but it took several weeks, or maybe months, to get everybody trained. First of all, we had to build all this, the bunker and a big target for them to fire at. And I was in the tower, and their hits came pretty close to the tower too many times. But it was a thing we wanted to do, things we did. When I say they sent me on this island with a few Marine, not a few, but about maybe 30, 40 Marines to work as a workforce, and I think we did a hell of a job just putting all that together on a snake-infested island. And the rattlers were big. You could see the rattlers were giants, and they had things called coach whips and all kinds of snakes. And so we worked with the snakes in the crowd. We avoided them as much as we could. Our commanding officer was a second lieutenant, so he was just out of military school, and so they put him there because they didn't want anybody to know who was the commanding officer. And so we worked with him, and it was weeks and weeks of every day getting up to the same thing. There was no regimentation there because we were on a mission to do what we wanted to be, what I wanted to do. It was, I loved it. It was, but after several months, when we accomplished all we were set out to do, then they shipped us out to the West Coast on a troop train. If you've ever been on a troop train, you get all personnel, all Marines on one train, and it's the longest train you ever saw in your life. And we took the southern route. We went down, we were in the Carolinas. We went down to Florida, and from Florida right across the country. We were 3 days and 3 nights going through Texas. That's how big. We never realized how big our country was until they put us in the train. And so I had a couple of those experiences. But militarily, I had the greatest respect for what I was doing, and a lot of my friends got killed. But people that I left home with we all went into the same platoon, and after the training, everybody got dispersed. Went to different places, and I went to radio school. So some went to for mechanics. They sent them to do that, but they were all Air Force inclined. But that was I had 3 years of that, and I think my mother's prayers is what kept me out of harm's way. Really. I also, when I knew you were coming, I stood up all night trying to do something, trying to get, you can have that, because I don't know if you want it or not, but maybe you'll enter it with your report. That starts me off from when I graduated high school when I was 17 years old, and I put off joining the Marines until I had already taken a job somewhere else. So I worked for Skinner Precision Industries doing war work, and I had about a year of that, and I said, I've had enough. I want to get back into the Marine thinking, and so I quit that job or I resigned from there, and I joined the Marines. I had a volunteer to be drafted. In my own mind, I joining, but when you asked that question, I remember when they gave me a serial number, it was not like the guys that had joined. My serial number was different. Mm-hmm. People that got in the Marine Corps, the way I got into the Marine Corps, had different serial numbers. I remembered my platoon number, 574. And I said, how the hell would you remember that after 60 years, 70 years? And I think it was all part of the training. I don't know. Oh, I have to tell you what that secret island was. It was, what did I tell you? Oh my God. What's the greatest golf island in the world? Hilton Head. Hilton Head Island. I think I got a lapse of memories here, but I'm only 90 years old, and I come to my office every day, so I still have that Marine instinct that nothing's going to happen until it happens. So I'm 90. I started this company of ours in 1957 after being in the grocery business for 15 years. After I got out of the Marine Corps, I was business oriented. I had no reason to do that. My father was a laborer in a manufacturing plant. He was a pressman in the printing department of Landers, Ferry and Clark. And so we had no background for being in business, but I had a feeling that when I was in the Marine Corps, before I got discharged, everybody was talking about what they were going to do when they got out. And I said, maybe I ought to try going into business. And so I had an opportunity to go into the auto parts business, and I did that for a couple of years, and it didn't work out too well. Then I went into the grocery business. It was a funny story how I got into grocery. After the auto parts business, I went home. I had nowhere to go, nothing to do. So my mother said, Joe, would you go to the store and get me a head of cabbage? She was making stuffed cabbage leaves. I said, okay, Mom, okay. So I went to the store, which was only down the street from our house. It was a very, very lovely store, nicest store in that part of the city. And I'm in there looking over the cabbage, and I hear this conversation going on between the owner and another guy that was in the store. And in about 5 minutes, he says to me, Joe, is there something you need I can help you with? I said, no, I'm just looking around. I'll be all right. So, I'm interested in what they're talking about. And finally, the conversation ended, and the other guy left. And I said to the owner, I said, are you selling this store? He said, yes. Why, you want to buy it? I said, yes. Just like that. So I got the head of cabbage, and I went home to my mother. She said, "Where were you? I've been waiting all this time." I said, "Mom, you sent me to the store for a head of cabbage, but I bought the store." "Oh my God," she said, "Joe, you didn't do that." I didn't have much money. When I got discharged from the Marine Corps, I got a mustering out pay of $700, and I had most of it. When I got discharged from the Marine Corps, this was interesting also. I had friends of mine. I was in California when the war ended. As a matter of fact, I was in San Diego, which is the most picturesque ending of a war anybody could ever see. Everybody was out in the center of San Diego. It was amazing. It was wonderful. Everybody was happy, and anyway, I had friends of mine in El Centro, California, is where the greatest cantaloupes are raised. So if you want to buy a cantaloupe, ask if it's made in El Centro, because they don't pick them till they're ripe. You can go to the stores and pick a cantaloupe up. They're green, and I am always giving my brother-in-law hell. He picks out cantaloupes. I say, only pick out the cantaloupe if the stem is out clean, So I don't know how we're getting cantaloupe from the Marine Corps, right? But because of the Marine Corps, my buddy was in El Centro with his family, and he said, "Gee, Joe, why don't you stick around for a little while?" And I said, "I'll see if I can get them to let me go." I said, "Will you let me take your car?" He said, "Oh, sure." So I went to apply for just being discharged in California. If you had a purpose, they would do it. I said, "Geez, I have my own car here, and I was planning on driving home in my own car." I said, "Okay." So they discharged me in California, gave me $700, and I went to El Centro. And within a 2-week period of time, my mother and our family knew I was discharged. My mother said, "When are you coming home? When are you coming home?" I said, "Oh, I'll be coming home." She said, "Your dad's very sick. He wants to see you." Oh, Jesus, she told me that, and after 2 weeks, I said to my friend, I said, "I'm going to go home. I'm going to hitchhike home." He said, "Take the car." I said, "No, I'll hitchhike." I went from El Centro to San Bernardino, picked up Route 66, and came all the way home on Route 66. And what an experience I had. Going through Oklahoma was wonderful, too. The Will Rogers Memorial is in Oklahoma, but it wasn't on Route 66. And one of the drivers that picked me up, hitchhiking, asked me if I ever heard of Will Rogers. I said, "Oh, yes, sure." He said, "The Will Rogers Memorial is here in Oklahoma." I said, "I didn't know that." He said, "Yeah, why don't you go there before you go home, because you'll never come." I told him I was from the East Coast. He said, "You'll never come back here to do that." He said, "And it's right here." I said, "What do you mean right here?" He said, it's "Look, I'll let you off, and it's 35 miles up the road." I said, "No, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do that." So he wouldn't let me out of the car. He drove me to 35 miles out of his way so I would see the Will Rogers Memorial. And what a blessing that was. I was a day and a half on the road, night and day, and I really enjoyed the museum, and I had my little valise with me that I was traveling with, and when I went to pick it up, I bumped my knee with it, and it started to limp as I was going out of the Will Rogers Memorial. And some car stopped and said, "Are you all right?" I said, "Yeah, I just bumped my knee a little bit." He said, "Where are you going?" In those days, you never told anybody where you're going. You just go, "I'm going out east," because you can tell they don't know where the hell New Britain is, right? He says, "You're going out east?" I said, "Yes." He says, "How far out east are you going?" And now I'm getting a little upset with the question. I said, "I'm going as far out as you can go, and then some." He said, "How would you like a ride to New York?" I said, "Whoa, from Oklahoma? Are you kidding me?" And from the museum, he took me back down to Route 66, And he said, how far do you think we'd get today? I said, if I was driving, we'd be in St. Louis by tonight. He said, you think we can make St. Louis? I said, I think so. I had the route all mapped out for coming home. We got to St. Louis, and I said to him, look, he had his wife and 2 daughters in the car. The 2 daughters were in the back seat with me, and him and his wife were in the front. So I was in my glory. I never had a date in a long time. So anyway, we got to St. Louis, and he said, I said, look, you go in, get yourself a room, and I'll stay in the car. I'll sleep in the car. He says, okay. So he went in with his wife, and he got 2 rooms, one for him and me, and one for the girls. I said, it was the first time I slept in a bed in a long time, but it was wonderful. And so we got up in the morning, and I said, you know, I always knew my place. I never got too close, never wanted to never be overly friendly. So I said to you go eat with your family, and I'll get a little snack over here. He said, you come with us. I said, okay. He insisted. All the way from Oklahoma to New York, he wouldn't let me put my hands in my pocket. I had my money in my shoes. I wouldn't take my shoes off. That's it. So anyway, I didn't want to impose on them that way, but they were very gracious to me. And when we got to New York, and he said, he says, I'm going only to New York now. You have to make the Connecticut on your own. I says, can you ask anybody where the wholesale marketplace is? When I was a kid, I worked with a man that sold fruit and vegetables on a truck, and he used to go to New York once a week to pick up fruits and vegetables. I said, if I can go to a place like that, I might get a ride. And so he found out where it was, and he took me to the wholesale produce. Was truck after truck was lined up, and all. It was wonderful. So everywhere the trucks were lined up, I'd go through asking them what state they're from, where are you from. Finally, some guy said, we're from Connecticut. I said, oh, you are? I said, geez, you know, I've been hitchhiking from California to here. I'd like a ride to Connecticut. Oh, sure, we'll take you. Whereabouts in Connecticut are you from? I said, well, you wouldn't know where it is. I said, but it's in New Britain. He said, New Britain, Connecticut? I said, yes. He said, we have a customer in New Britain, Connecticut. We're going to take you home. And they did. It took me right to my house. He says, you see that house over there, right next door to our house? I said, yeah, that's Da Vinci's house. He said, Da Vinci's are customers of ours. So that's how I got from El Centro to San Bernardino to the museum out of my way, right to New York and to Connecticut. That was how I left the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. But when I was in the Marine Corps, I enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it. And I do believe the discipline that they made us go through was success. The thing that was successful in my life. Mm-hmm. I got discharged in 1946, and I met my wife at a Christmas party in Springfield, Massachusetts in 1946. And we didn't get married until 1949 because I was broke, a poor boy. A poor boy. Yes, I was. But I think the discipline was, after we got married and had children, we raised our family the way my parents raised us. Was a lot of respect. Mm-hmm. And I put the respect with the discipline. I used to take my children out in the backyard and give them close order drills. And so I have this, you just met the girl you met here today, my youngest daughter, mm-hmm. Jody, and she's 60. So I have 3 daughters. My oldest daughter, Susan Marie, is 64, And my next daughter, Laurel Ann Klepacki, is 62, and Jody was 60. And my wife and I are still married to each other. She has Alzheimer's. It's a sad way to go, but we're living with it, and so I have her at home with me. But I have women taking care of her when I'm not there, and so I have an opportunity to come to my office on a daily basis because the women that we have that are helping me with my wife are so wonderful, and it's just worked out very well. And Dolores and I have been married 65 years. 65 years. With the same woman, yes. But, and my wife is wonderful. We had a wonderful marriage, and it's just unfortunate that she's befallen this Alzheimer's. Her sister has a dementia also, and her sister is from Worcester, Massachusetts, but she's in a convalescent home. And she never got married, and you know, when you're alone, it's a lot different than when you have a husband. And so I try to be as good as I could to their family, but they knew what they wanted to do. And all I know is I love my wife, and I wanted to do what was right by her. And so I heard so many stories about convalescent homes and, you know, being away from the house. I decided to go the extra expense and bring people into my house for care of Dolores. And so it's worked out quite well.
Mm-hmm.
And we're way off from the Marine Corps, but I don't know if you want to know anything else about the Marines.
Yeah, just to go back to boot camp. Where did you go to boot camp?
Paris Island. I got on a troop train in New Britain when after I was managed to get through accomplishing getting to be a Marine. There was four of us. One guy was an Italian, Julian Pansini. I remembered all of their names. And another guy was Polish, Albin Janczak. And then we had a man of color, a colored guy, Calvin Sturgis, and me. The four of us got on a troop train in Berlin Station, which is not too far from here. Mm-hmm. And my parents, my father took the day off from work, and my mother and father and my brother and sisters all came to bid me farewell. And my poor father was struggling with a $20 a week job, and he saw these boys over there, and he went over, gave each one of them $1. He said, "This is for luck." He said, $1, you know. What did you do with $1? But he was a generous man, and that's what he wanted to do. And it was so we left Berlin Station, and we got on this train. I didn't realize that this train is going to make a lot of stops between here and Port Royal. I didn't even know where the hell Port Royal was. That's the last stop before Paris Island. Mm-hmm. When you get to Port Royal, you got to get on a boat and you get up to Paris Island. Because at that time, you could not reach Paris Island by land, but you could today. It's connected somehow. Mm-hmm. You could do it, but in those days we couldn't. So I enjoyed that. So we stopped. Imagine now having hundreds of guys on a troop train. They have to go to the bathroom every once in a while. They have to eat every once in a while. And every city they'd stop, pick up 4 or 5 more, found another half a dozen. And, we got to Florence, South Carolina, and they said, "We're going to let you all off this train. You go and get breakfast out there." So we got a wonderful breakfast on that train for almost 2 days from the time I left home. So you asked what to do the first day, you know. But we managed, and I don't mean to be repetitious, but I love the Marine Corps. Mm-hmm. And even when I got discharged from the Marine Corps, I while I was at home on leave once, the sergeant of the police force in New Britain was a Marine when he was younger, and they had a club called the Marine Corps League, and he wanted to know if I would join. I said, "Oh, what do I want with a club?" He said, "You got to join this. When you get out, it'll be there for you." So I joined the Marine Corps League. It must have been in 1944 or somewhere. And when I got out, I went to a meeting, and I just saw all the guys that I went to school with that were Marines, and from different places, and they all were part of the Marine Corps League. Eventually, I became the commandant of the local chapter here in New Britain, and then I went on from there. I became the adjutant paymaster for the Department of Connecticut, the Marine Corps League, in those days, 1944, 46, I guess. 40 is when I did that. So I've been a member of the Marine Corps League ever since. Mm-hmm. So I've been one of the oldest members in Connecticut, and probably one of the oldest members in the country. But I was the commandant, and I did have status, and that was a wonderful experience too. Yeah. So if you read this story, the last words in this several pages,
yeah, I noticed.
Semper Fi. Semper Fi. Semper Fi is abbreviation for Semper Fidelis. Semper Fidelis means always faithful. And we learned that in the Marine Corps in boot camp, and we still use it 70 years later. I wound up my conversation with Semper Fi. That's how I felt about the Marine Corps. I never was in harm's way, but I shouldn't say that, because some of those rockets those guys were firing almost got me. But no, it was a wonderful experience. I always wanted to be in some action, but that was not to be the case, and so I didn't miss it too much. But I got out to California. I was stationed at Camp Pendleton for a while. I was in the naval base in San Diego. So that's a lot of years ago, 65, 70 years ago, I guess. I joined the Marines in 1943, 44. Anyway, since 1944, 70 years, 2014. That's where we are, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, where did you go to radio school?
In Jacksonville, Florida, the Naval Air Station.
And what were the typical days like there for you for that training?
Oh, we were not. We didn't have to go through anything strenuous, like a discipline, but we were a detachment of Marines. I wasn't there by myself. We had a detachment of Marines. It was a naval base, and it was all Navy, except our detachment was Marines. And one in charge of our detachment said, "Look, we're here. We're Marines. We're going to show like we're Marines. When we go to school, we don't drag our ass. We go marching to school. Is that okay with everyone?" "Oh, sure." We all agree. So we used to march to class, and he'd give us close order drill, with all of that, and the Navy personnel would be lined up in the streets like it was a parade, And so I was sitting there taking cold one day, and the guy next to me says, "Jesus, you were in the Marines, eh?" I said, "Yes, I was. I am." He said, "Boy, I wish I was a Marine." I said, "Why?" He said, "The way you guys act, the way you march to school, everything is regimented." He says, "You have wonderful discipline." I said, "Yeah, but you have to learn how to live with that." It took us a while first. And boot camp was 8 weeks. But it wasn't a piece of cake. 8 weeks were very stressful. But we learned how to fire our rifles from there. We learned how to put the bayonets on our rifles, and we had to do enactment of "kill or be killed" was the slogan that they used with the bayonets. So, well, I hope we never have to use them, but we were prepared to do that. And I never had any regrets. I had a lot of respect for the Marine Corps, and I believe a lot of people have respect for me for that also. But I was born and brought up in New Britain, a poor boy. Mm-hmm. And then when I finally, even though I was struggling through businesses when I was younger, I was still going to school nights. And so I did the best I could. I never got a degree, but I think I had more education than a doctorate degree because I just kept going to school. And I was majoring in business administration, and you know, I was at that point I was in my 30s, and so one day they were interviewing me. I needed a course for commercial law, and they couldn't accommodate me because the course was already filled. And so I said, geez, I got to have that course. He said, the instructor said, do you own a home of your own? I said, hey, no, I'm born a poor boy. I'm working a grocery store. He said, you know, someday you may want to buy a house. There's a course in real estate in the summertime, and it's a SNAP course, he said, and you get 3 credits. Oh, that's all I needed there. I said, oh, that's wonderful. I'll take it. You know, yeah, I needed some ease and to go with it. I'm working all day long in the store, and I needed a break. So when I got into the real estate class, prior to that, when I was going to school nights, I was competing with kids that couldn't make it during the day, that were making up at night. So they're in their teens, and I'm in my 30s, and I felt like an old man with these kids. But when I got into this real estate course, it was like night and day. I mean, they were all mature people, lawyers and appraisers and people in various stages connected with real estate. And I felt so comfortable in that environment. And several weeks into the course, the instructor asked me if I would be interested in going in real estate. And I said, I'm in the grocery business. I haven't got time for real estate. But he kept on my back. And so much so, one day I went home, I said to my wife, geez, I don't know what I'm going to do. He keeps asking me to go in business, and I can't get away. You know, in the grocery business, the weekends are is where you're needed the most. In real estate, weekends and evenings are what you need. And I didn't have that. So my wife said to me, hey, Joe, if he thinks you're that good, there's an empty store right next to the store. Why don't you open a little office for yourself? I said, oh, Dolores, I could never open an office for myself. I said, what do I know about real estate? She said, you just went to real estate school. You ought to know. Like you're supposed to know everything automatically, right? So, but you know, as it came to pass, I mentioned to one of my customers in the store that I was thinking about opening a real estate office next door. And he was in the sign business. I said, gee, maybe you could make a sign for me. He says, oh, sure, I could. He says, do you have any of those beer signs that you see in the windows? Oh, geez, I got a cellar full. Every beer company wants to put their sign in my window. They leave the signs here. Because in the grocery store, we sold beer at the... And he said, well, you take a look at the sign. He said, oh, yeah. So you got everything you need here. What color do you want? I said, I want red, white, and blue. Take a look out that window. Take a look out that window. See that sign up there?
Yep.
I got red, white, and blue with Uncle Sam's hat on the T. My daughter made that for me, my logo. Uncle Sam's hat with the T, just like the New York Yankees. And I was a Yankee fan at the time, so I put the hat on the T, and and the rest is history. He was so wonderful with me. He was a customer in the store, but he arranged for me to get, he said he knew somebody had a roll-top desk. And he said, I'll take the roll-top off and you'll have a beautiful desk. I was sorry I ever let him do that, because the roll-top desk, you couldn't get them. But at that time, I didn't have an appreciation for it that much, you know. But maybe you have another question for me.
Yeah, so after Florida, is that when you went to South Carolina onto the island to do
Yes.
all the radios?
Generally speaking, I don't know where the heck they moved me from pillar to post, but I did wind up in South Carolina and on Congaree Field. It was outside of, what's the capital of South Carolina? Anyway, it was in Congaree Field. And so I was there for a while, and that's when they garnered up troops sent to this island to do a rocket raid.
When you were up in the actual up on the tree there, what would they have you do?
Oh, I was directing their fire. I was directing their planes coming in, and for it was almost like coming in for a landing, only they're coming in, zeroing in on this big target. Remember, 500-foot in circumference target, and so I was given direction from them. But I'd be in the tower, and it all depends where the planes were coming from. They'd call the tower, and they say we had codes, you know, we were conversing with, and they said they're sending a squadron in at such and such a time to make sure everyone's on board. And so we got our instructions from the airfields that were sending the pilots in. Now here's me, 21 years old, a kid, directing pilots that are older, and they're captains and colonels and even lieutenants. They needed the coaching. They needed someone to give them direction, and so they'd fire them, and we'd tell them that you'd have to so many degrees this way and so much that way. But that's what I did. I manipulated up there. But there was nobody else. I was the only radio man in the group, so I had all that responsibility. And so they would tell us in advance how many groups were going to come in the next day or the following week. They told us. The surprise was when they told us that someone was coming, a group was coming in from the Navy, and to do a trick with them. And every time there was a new group that came out, they couldn't see the target. You know, they were firing, but it took time for them to hone in on target. So by the time we sent up to Iwo Jima, they were on target, and they did a hell of a job. And I am assuming, just what they told us, that our people went to Iwo Jima, and so it was a hell of a war. The island hopping till they get to Japan. They didn't have to go after it turned out when President Roosevelt died, and our country had just discovered the atom bomb. They're working on it for years, and they had it now. And so Truman, when he became president, didn't hesitate for a moment. He just said that. Well, previous to that, there was a group of pilots that flew into Japan to bomb Japan, the mainland, for the first time that ever happened, and that was probably 6 months before what I'm talking about now. But when Truman decided he wasn't going to wait for any more island hopping, any more landings, because we were getting slaughtered, and so he did the authority to drop a bomb on Hiroshima, and then nothing happened. The first day they wiped out an entire city with one bomb. Next day, and they never heard from anybody, so the next day they did Nagasaki, did another bomb. And then we heard from everybody over there. It was over. It was over. And previous to that, the war had ended in Europe, and now we're battling the Japanese. The Japanese got us into this mess because they went to Pearl Harbor on December 7th. And so we always remembered Pearl Harbor, like the Alamo.
Mm-hmm.
So another question?
Yeah, so after South Carolina, you had to go to San Diego.
Yeah.
Did they tell you why?
Well, yeah, I was going to go to the Pacific. I was going to meet people that wanted to fire. By that time, I'm almost like an expert in rocket firing,
Mm-hmm.
and so they wanted me to go on a troop ship to go out in the Pacific. But when I got to San Diego, they were dilly-dallying, and the war became over. And I was in San Diego. I was downtown San Diego when it was over, and the excitement was just unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
It was like New York City. It was a city is a city is a city. But everybody was just happy that it was over. And so and now I got a dilly-dally in California. I didn't know what they were going to do with me. I was drafted, but I volunteered for that draft, but I could let them do with me whatever they wanted, and they did.
Now, in South Carolina on the island, did you have barracks that were built there?
Yes, we had a barracks. It was built for us. And I mentioned that in the copy that I gave you. We were fortunate enough to have decent barracks, and we were assigned a place to eat. What do you call it? A mess hall.
Mm-hmm.
And our cook, we only had one cook, but he was the cook he was the chef for the governor of Maine. And so we had the best chef in the whole damn Marine Corps. And so that made us kind of happy. We worked hard, but we ate well.
Mm-hmm.
And about those snakes, some of the guys know how to work with snakes. They would catch snakes and make belts out of the skins. I said I didn't want any snake skins. I didn't want, but we had. They did to pass some time with. Other than that, there was always a deck of cards around. Played a little pinochle, it was always kept busy. But there were no regimentation on this island. We had work to do during the day, and when the evening came, we just went to the mess hall, had something to eat, and we go back to our barracks. And if you want to play cards or you want to write letters home, I got letters. I got a stack of letters in my drawer here that I haven't opened in maybe 40 years. I haven't opened them at all since maybe 60 years. But
is that how you stayed in touch with your family while you were away?
Yeah, we wrote to each other. Yeah, not only my family, but family and friends, and I met acquaintances. I graduated high school in 1942, and of course that was the first graduating class after war was declared, and so it was the infamous class of 42.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a lot of friends from that class.
Now, when the rockets were falling that close to you, some of them uncomfortably close, as you said, how would you handle that stress when that would happen? Was there anything you would do, or
no? We just accepted it. We tried to. It wasn't that often, but every once in a while they'd have a misfire, and that would happen. But no, we were really never in harm's way.
Mm-hmm.
Not that much. So it came close to the tower. It came close to the bunkers where we had men in the bunker to call the shots on the target. And sometimes they'd hit the bunker before the target, and we'd get a big kick out of that. We thought it was quite funny. Did you ever hear of this group?
No.
Okay, they sent me a questionnaire to fill out. I thought you were connected with them. That's why I brought this in with me. But that's all. Anyway, I gave you a copy of what I wrote, but some of what we discussed is in that. You might like. It's very well done, and I did the best of my ability. I stayed up. That's what I did, see. I stayed up at night, read all night long, several pages of it. And I brought it into Jean this morning. I told her you were coming here, if she could have this typed out. So she did, and she brought an extra copy for you and one for me. So now I'll enjoy reading it myself.
Did you ever go on leave?
Yes.
And what you do?
Not from there. Not from that island. No, we couldn't get out of there. We're not supposed to get out.
Yeah.
But I did come home twice, I believe. And when I did, there was nobody my age around. The guys were all either drafted or volunteered in some military service. But there were always girls around and a lot of family. And so I took up a relationship with a girl that I went to school with, and she became very prominent in Connecticut. We were very, very close all during the war, but then after the war, I don't know, she went her way, I met Dolores, and she met some other guy, and she got married, I got married. But then all these years later, we are still the best of friends. Her name is Lois Bloomstrand. She's very prominent in civic activities, but she's my age, so she's kind of laid back a little bit now. But she was a wonderful, wonderful friend, and I could have married her if I didn't meet Dolores. But then I met Dolores, and that was all she wrote.
What did you think of your officers and your fellow servicemen?
Well, I had a lot of respect for her. I only had a little bit of trouble when I was stationed at Congaree Field before I went to the island. I had a falling out with one of the guys there. My locker was next to his locker, but I was a very trusting person, so I never locked my locker. Now, when I discovered so much of it was missing, I confronted him with it, and he was bigger than I was. He wanted to fight me for it, and I said, "You can have whatever you got. I don't need it that bad." I joined the Marines. I'd kill or be killed. That's fine, but I don't want to be killed by one of my own guys. So, but other than that, I got along with our personnel very, very well. Everybody I ran into in the Marine Corps, all the time I was there, the guys were just wonderful. They were more like I was. It's what they wanted to do and what they wanted to be. And so, when you want something bad enough, you'll acquiesce. Yeah.
Did you stay in contact with any of them after the war?
Yes, I did. As I mentioned, in El Centro, I had a very close friend of mine. We were in the Marines together, too. But, time has a way of distancing people, And but he did come to visit me in Connecticut once. But he had 3 children, and the youngest one they named Joseph because I was with them. But eventually he divorced that wife, or his wife divorced him, or whatever. They weren't married any longer. But when he came to visit me, he came with a new wife and introduced me to. But other than that, when you talk about coming home, I joined the Marine Corps League, and they're all Marines, and so we always had a wonderful relationship. And they thought enough about me to make me the commander of the local group, and I was. And so I did have a lot of attachment to the club members for the Marine Corps League.
Were there any other organizations you joined?
Well, yes, I did, but I never was faithful to them like I was with the Marine Corps League, the VFW, and the American Legion. I used to send them contributions until I got out of the habit of doing it. But I've been sending them contributions until maybe the last year or two. So, but I had a lot of respect for anybody in the military. Yeah. We had one purpose, victory. And that kind of sounds canny, but it's true. Anyway, what else?
You kind of answered it a little bit, but how did your time in the military influence your thinking of war in general, even to this day?
I don't like war. I mean, I was never in harm's way, but I think war is a tremendous waste of men and money. And we didn't need this war in Iraq. You know, they accused the prime minister, or whatever he was, the king of Iraq, of making an atom bomb. And President Bush at that time decided he was going to stop him. But they did. They went over to Iraq. And you know, I have to tell you, Iraq, is, from my understanding, is the oldest, they possess the oldest scientific facilities in the world. The oldest scientific facilities in the world. The oldest. And we went in and bombed it. That broke my heart because I had appreciation for scientific things. But those people didn't deserve to be bombed. And we, in the beginning, they were saying, well, they lose 400 Iraqis and 4 of our guys. I said, listen, 4 of our guys are worth all of theirs. We shouldn't be there to begin with. And I disagreed with President Bush at that time, and his own Secretary of State disagreed with him too. What was his name? Colin Powell. Colin Powell, he went to talk to Colin Powell about doing what he did. And Colin Powell's answer was, do you realize what you just did? He declared war without even going to the Congress. He just did it. And Colin Powell said, that's the worst thing you could have done. And as it turned out, we spent billions, trillions of dollars, and lots of life lost. And ever since we've been out to Iraq, the whole Middle East became an upheaval. And, you know, and so I kind of make light of it, but I say to almost everybody I meet that, you know, we have a wonderful country. I love America. I'm proud to be an American. But one thing is that we're talking peace all over the world, and we're the only ones shooting. You know, Russia's not shooting, you know, no one's shooting but us. And I don't really like that. I mean, the United States of America can do nothing to make me upset with the country. I love this country, but I'm a little disappointed in shooting. It's unfair. Now the Israeli government has been having a lot of trouble with Jerusalem and those people. Well, those people invited the Israeli people off the boats after World War II. They had nowhere to go. After World War II, all the people leaving Europe had quotas in every country. You know, if you're Polish, you have to take only so many people. But if you're Jewish, you only take so many people. Well, what happened after all that was done? A lot of people don't remember this, but I'm still 90 years old, and remember that there were 5 loads of Jewish people that were not accepted in England, France, or the United States, or anywhere else. And the Palestinian government opened their doors and let the Israelis come to Palestine. And now, what the Israelis did to the Palestinians is incredible. They were firing on the children on the beaches. You saw the pictures in the papers. I couldn't believe that our government or any government would allow them to do that. And now they want to talk peace. They've been talking peace for years. But they don't want peace. They want a piece of Jerusalem. So they made their capital, it used to be Tel Aviv, they made their capital Jerusalem. Now Jerusalem belonged to the Palestinians. And Jerusalem is a religious harbor for all faiths. So now the Israelis made Jerusalem their capital, just like the Jerusalems. And now they're building on occupied territories. They're building apartment buildings. It's very unfair. And they're talking peace, but they're not having peace. So you got that going on in the Middle East. You got trouble in Egypt. You got trouble in various countries because our influence is we try to get people to make a democratic nation out of their country. And they're not ready for that. You know, the women are what they are. They're not going to make them queens like they are in the United States. It's just, it's not time for that. Mm-hmm. But no matter how hard you try, they want to say, well, they want to give women rights all over the world. Well, that's true, and they should have them. I agree with that. But, I mean, are they ready to accept it? Yeah. Anyway, how did we get on that kick? But,
did you go to school with the GI Bill? Is that how you went to real estate school?
No. My brother and I, when we got discharged, my brother was in the armored division, 1st Armored Division. I was in the tank corps for the Army. And when he got discharged, and I was discharged before him, but by the time I hitchhiked home, we were home within days of each other. And so we decided we were going to go to school, or Central Connecticut State University. Now, at that time, was called Teachers College of Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And so we decided we're going to go to school there. So we took out applications, and we did. And meanwhile, my cousin, I have a cousin in Hartford, decided he was working for an auto parts company. He said he'd like to try the auto parts business. Would I go in business with him? I said, what do I know about auto parts? I just got out of the Marine Corps. I don't know anything about cars. And he said, but I do. He says, will you come with me? And I said, okay, but I wonder what it's going to take. He says, well, we need a few $100. Would you ask your father if we could use his car? My father's car. That was a 1936 Plymouth. And my father wouldn't deny me anything, so I asked him. He said, sure. So we started the auto parts business. And we did very well. We were called wagon jobbers, going from gas station to garages. And so we had a route from here to Springfield because we had relatives in Springfield. So we would work our way to Springfield all week long. And we get there on the weekend and we work our way back another way. And within a 2-year period of time, we got 2 little trucks filled with merchandise, and we were doing pretty well. The first year, we didn't take any salary at all. The second year, we allowed ourselves $25 a week. And then my cousin partner said, Joe, the way we're going, we're never going to get anywhere. I said, what are you talking about? Look, we got 2 trucks full of merchandise. He said, yeah, but you go to the gas station, you buy $15 or $20 worth of stuff. They should be buying $500 worth of stuff. They're never going to buy that from us. I said, well, we don't have that kind of stuff. He said, no, but we can give them credit. I said, credit? You want to loan people credit? He said, yeah. I said, well, okay. It was his idea, so I went along with him. By the first month, the gas stations and garages were ordering like $500 worth of tires, $250 worth of antifreeze, we got all this on credit, and we had to pay for everything and give them credit. They weren't paying us. So we went broke after 2 years. We wound up with the trucks. That's how I dated my wife, with a truck, a little old truck, maybe a 1931 or 32 little Dodge or something. Anyway, that's what I did. What your question was?
If you went to school with the GI Bill.
Yeah, no, but I would have. My brother did, and he graduated college and got a job as a school teacher. Right, this is 4 years after the war is over. He started as a school teacher in a junior high school, Washington Junior High School in New Britain, for $2,400 a year. $2,400. Well, at the time, that seemed like a lot of money. And he started 2 or 3 weeks late because he couldn't get a job. He'd take anything he could get. But the following year, they had increased. Everybody that was a teacher got an increase in his salary, but they wouldn't increase his salary because he started 2 weeks too late. So for $2,400. So he turned around and got a job with a supply house, and the guy gave him $5,000 a year. And so he stayed doing that for a number of years, but he got his degree on the GI Bill of Rights. And I had applied for it, and I was entitled to it, but I never collected on it. So when I went to school, I paid my own way because there were night courses. If you were going to do a GI Bill of Rights, they had organized curriculum.
Was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't go over already?
Well, I don't know. I think we talked about quite a bit. But no, I don't think so. I was never sorry I was a Marine. I was happy to be a Marine. You know what they say, once a Marine, always a Marine. So that never changed with me. You see the red, white, and blue. You see the sign that says Gustin on that book, red, white, and blue. Everything is red, white, and blue for me. I love America. I do. And I'm a member of the Lions Club now. I was president of the Lions Club. I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. I was president of almost any organization. I was on boards of directors of banks. I was in the hospital. I served well, not only in the business community, but I gave well of my time. I believed in, I was a founder of a Catholic church in Newington called Holy Spirit, and I introduced the first pastor to the congregation. As people called on me, I was in the real estate business. They said, you know everybody, you introduced the priest. So we didn't have a church. We used the auditorium in the school right near where the church was going up. So that's where I introduced our pastor. And that was a nice experience for me. And I became first president of the men's club, and I was very much religious oriented, and I still have a fond respect for my religion, and I try to remember where I came from. And my parents were that way, and although they never had a lot of anything, but I was fortunate. I was a workaholic, and in the real estate business, it never ends. Work never ends. So we work when other people don't work. When they're off of jobs, then we can work with them. So we work when they are working, and we work when they're not working. So, or it's a full-time job. This is not my office. This is a little conference room. I see all these pictures. I have a lot of testimonials in my office from a lot of different things. As I said before, I have no regrets. about being a Marine, a United States Marine.
Well, if there's nothing else, I'd like to thank you for your service, and thank you for taking the time to have your day to sit down and be interviewed with us.
Thank you. I hope it was a sufficient effort for you.
Yes, very much so.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to end this conversation with Semper Fi.